Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Stephen Jardine, and on behalf of Maggie's, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this afternoon's special live online discussion. This is part of a series of events that we're doing during the pandemic to support people who are living with cancer, and they've been made possible for us by the generous ongoing support from those lovely people at the People's Postcode Lottery. So we're very grateful for that. So when you hear that phrase, the big C, what do you think of? Well, we all think of cancer, don't we? But of course, over the course of the past year, there's another big C that's entered our lives, and that is coronavirus. It's left nearly all of us isolated in one form or another. And then you add in another C to all of this for those people with cancer who are isolated at home because of coronavirus, and that's children who are at home because schools are closed. Home education has been the name of the game. So given all that, this afternoon what we're exploring is what happens when you put cancer, coronavirus and children together, what support is available, and maybe how you find a way through this when you're coping with all three of these C's. We have two special, brilliant guests to help us do that this afternoon. Let me introduce you to them. First of all, we're joined by Kat Lyle. Now, Kat is a mum of two and an intensive care nurse. Kat was diagnosed with hormone-positive breast cancer in 2019 and started a course of chemotherapy. Then early last year, she discovered she had the BRCA gene and has been juggling cancer, living through coronavirus and homeschooling her two children, aged 7 and 5 as well. I'll speak to Kat in a moment. Also with us this afternoon, Amanda Proctor. 20 years ago, believe it or not, Amanda used to feel faint at the very sight of blood. Thankfully for all of us, she got past that and went on to develop an interest in cancer, oncology and palliative care. Amanda completed a postgraduate qualification in cancer care and began her journey as a clinical nurse specialist and is now centre head at Maggie's Leeds. Kat, Amanda, we're so pleased to have you both with us this afternoon. We three are going to have a chat right now, which you can listen to, and then we'll work our way through as many questions as we can from you in the time available we have this afternoon. So just please use the Q&A function on Teams to send any questions that you've got and share your experiences. Be really interested to know your experiences as well of cancer, coronavirus and children this afternoon, and any observations that you've got as we go through our conversation. So let's start this afternoon with Kat Lyle. First, Kat, so grateful to you for your time this afternoon. Where are you speaking to us from? At home, in the kitchen?
Hi, Stephen. I'm actually upstairs. Nice to see you this afternoon, but I'm actually hiding upstairs in my bedroom at home in Wetherby because my two children have been bribed with their tablets and a bit of screen time to give me some peace to do this call.
That's not bribery. That's just positive parenting. We like all of that. All right, let's go right back to the beginning, Kat, and just so everyone understands what we're going to talk about here, can you take us through your diagnosis journey?
So I was diagnosed with a hormone-positive breast cancer back in October 2019. It was something that I was unfamiliar with. We didn't have particularly a family history of it, and I just found a lump in the shower one day. Got told it was unlikely to be anything to be of a concern, but followed the channels, got it investigated, and unfortunately did get the diagnosis that it was cancer. I was 38 years old at the time, and at the time used to go into a little bit of a tailspin. I thought, oh, crikey, this is news that is going to be difficult to deal with. But the doctors, the NHS, were amazing, and they gave me a plan. So my plan at that time was to have a lumpectomy. It was reasonably early stages, so they could remove it with a procedure just to remove the cancer. We follow up with chemotherapy because it was quite aggressive, and then a period of radiotherapy. So I felt, obviously it was a difficult time, but I had a plan, so I was able to kind of, go forwards with that at that time.
What was your first experience of Maggie's?
My first experience of Maggie's didn't come till a little bit later. I think when you first get a diagnosis, you read around a lot yourself. You get quite absorbed in the world of cancer. And like I say, it's not something that I had a huge amount of experience about. My friends all came to support me because at the time in October 2019, that was the time when you could lean on your family, you could lean on your friends. I had a lot of support around me. And like I say, once I think I had that medical plan, it was something that I felt comfortable with the GPs and the hospital teams to go forwards with. It wasn't until a little bit later that after I'd had my initial treatment phases and I found out that I had the BRCA2 gene, where it felt another level. It was compounding the bad news. There was bad news sort of on top of bad news for me, and I think I dealt with it pretty well, like the initial cancer diagnosis for a period of time. The chemotherapy, it's tricky, and sort of juggling things, but it came at a point in my life, in personal life as well, where I was sort of running out of road. I was tired from the effects of treatment, and actually my husband got to a point as well where he found that the whole process had taken its toll on our marriage. So the cancer had affected our marriage to a point, and he left. So as the wheels sort of really fell off with the additional procedures and the implications of the genetic condition on top of the cancer and the treatment, my strength kind of wobbled a little bit, and I really then turned to Maggie. So I went, I don't know what to do anymore. I can't keep, I couldn't see a way forwards. And I just, one day I sat at home, and my children were at school that day, and I didn't know what to do. So I picked my phone up, and I just knew that Maggie's was there. I'd been told about it earlier on in my treatment. Picked the phone up, and I spoke to Helen. She answered the phone and listened as I kind of sobbed down the phone at her, just saying, I don't know, this is all too much for me now. And they were just there to listen. And after I'd explained about the compounds of the different things for me, what was going on, she then put me in touch with Emma. And Emma's the clinical psychologist at the Leeds Maggie Centre, and she agreed to see me and just talk me through what was going on and help me understand sort of my treatment, my diagnosis, and the way that I was maybe responding to that, and sort of reassured me that it was okay. It was okay that I was finding it difficult. It was okay that it was a little bit of a struggle, and just sort of helped me unscramble my brain a little bit and just recognise that it was a journey, it was a process, it was difficult, but there was still light at the end of the tunnel, and just helped me kind of find a way to keep going.
Kat, this is the second in a series that we've done, cancer during coronavirus. You've just stumbled upon, well done you, another great topic for us to look at, which is relationships during this too, because it's such an intense time for everybody, and so few places to hide in the house in these moments when you do need to hide, and there's a kind of intensity in every house in the country. You add cancer to that mix, and it's easy to understand how things just start to fall apart. Talk to me about the kids, and when you first had that conversation about what Mum was going through, and how did you find the words? How did you know what to say to them, Kat?
I think with children, your own children, and you have to, as a parent, you just have to think, sort of look at them. We took a little bit of advice from the school. I did speak to Maggie Centre again about different resources that there would be to broach it with children. So in the very early stages, we kept it not hidden from them, but we wanted to broach it at a time when the initial sort of peak of emotion had passed. I didn't want to be sort of crying in front of them, so I had to get over the initial diagnosis before I had that conversation. That was a personal thing to me, that I wanted to be able to speak to them calmly, and I think that took a little bit of time just for me to understand what the way forwards would be. So when I did speak with them, I could reassure them that I knew what the plan was. And for me, the point that I did speak to them was when Mummy had to go into hospital to have the lump removed, and I kept it in simple language for them. They're 5 and 7, so and I just answered the questions which they had at the time. But it was incredibly difficult. I mean, we'd spoken to the school before we told the children, and that was so if they needed some support with their schooling, or sort of from another adult in their life, if they wanted to say that mummy's not very well, they knew that they would have that support in place at their school. But at home, we just tried not to make too big a deal of it initially, and just led the conversation by their reactions, and just dripped a little bit of information in as they, said, oh, well, mummy's got this lump that we need to, that could make her poorly. And I said, we need to get rid of it. So mummy needs an operation, and she'll have some medicine to make sure the lump can't come back. And at that very early stage, that was enough. I also sat with my daughter, who she's a little bit more intuitive. My little boy, he's a firecracker, he's a whirlwind. As long as he's got what he needs, and has got his dinner on the table and a bit. He was like, oh, that's all right. My little girl, she's a bit more sensitive. So I read the Mummy's Lump, which is a book which I was given, but I think from Maggie's actually. And I just sat down and we read it together one evening, and it very gently explained that, so mummy might be a bit upset, mummy might be, there might be conversations that they witness, but not to be worried. And that was how we started off.
If they're 5 or 15, there's one thing they want to know, and that is, are you going to be okay, mum? It doesn't matter what the story is. Every child wants it to have a happy ending when it's mum and cancer. Did you have that conversation with them? Did they ask you that?
We tried not. I think I was lucky that the children had actually been exposed to the word cancer before my diagnosis. Their school had done some work actually to support cancer charities. They'd done a fun run prior to my diagnosis. So the word cancer wasn't completely alien to them. And they also hadn't, in our family, witnessed a difficult situation. They didn't associate cancer with a poor outcome. They hadn't seen that everybody that got cancer, maybe doesn't, how the significance of how that could be. So we were able to kind of reassure them that mummy was going to receive as much treatment. She was going to listen to the doctors, said mummy was going to behave herself and do everything that she was asked. And that, there was a way forwards. And I think we didn't try and make it any more complicated than that. And as just said, there might be days where you just need to give mummy an extra cuddle.
I wonder if your job helped as well, Kat. I'm just thinking, my sister-in-law has just come through kidney cancer, and she's a GP in Gateshead. And she said it's tough when you're medical, because you can read between the lines what's being told to you, but you also understand a lot more about the treatment and what's going to happen to your body and stuff. Did it help you? And did it maybe help with those conversations with the kids, because they know, well, mum gets this stuff?
Yeah, I think it probably did help, Stephen, to be honest. My training, I've been witness to many a difficult conversation, unfortunately, previously with my job, and I've sat in the room with the relatives, so I could sense the tone when I was being delivered information, by my consultant and by the team. I think, the pre-warning shots that I got given, I was able to sort of read between those lines. I think it made it quite difficult for my husband at the time, because I was asking questions. We were on a different page. He's not from a medical background, whereas I am. So I think that put a little bit of unbalance between the two of us, because I would be asking things. It does make it a little bit trickier when you've got that awareness. I tried to look at it from a patient perspective and not my nursing head, because it is very different when you're the patient, and it's a very different specialty to what I normally do. So I was very conscious to say that, say, don't talk to me in nurse speak. Just I'm a patient, just tell me everything that I need to know. Because it's a whole new world that you get sort of drawn into and that you're unaware of. So
here we are, 4th of March we were talking, Kat. Turn the clock back 12 months, what a difference a year has made. When all this time last year, we were just starting to get into the early stages, looking ahead towards lockdown. It was all starting to look very gloomy in terms of what life was going to be like. How did you feel back then, knowing that you were living through cancer, but also things were starting to close down in your life?
I was absolutely petrified at the time. As coronavirus was starting to draw, and before we had maybe the level of understanding that we do at the moment, I was receiving chemotherapy. So I knew that I was immunocompromised. I knew that I would potentially, from those early things we were finding out about it, I was thinking, crikey, am I going to have to shield? Am I going to have to, what does this mean? Can I not leave the house for, months at a time? It was really quite a scary time. 3rd of April. It was my children's birthdays are both in March, so I was sort of thinking, well, how are we going to get, are they going to get their birthday parties? and at that time, you start to, before we sort of realised what maybe the implication were, you could see it coming, but you didn't quite know what level it would be affecting us to. It was trying to understand what the greater impact would be. I was off work anyway, because with nursing, there's often a lot of infections, and there's lots of reason to maybe not be in the hospital whilst you're receiving chemotherapy. So I had adjusted to maybe not working whilst I was receiving my treatment. So I'd already made that adjustment, but then my world closing down even more, and losing the contacts. I'd actually formed a little group. I used to go walking with some ladies from my local area, which had also received cancer diagnosis, and it's just to touch base with people that were in that similar position to you. People that have had cancer or have cancer get it. And I think unless you're maybe in that situation, unless you're in those shoes, people can empathise, they can understand, they can try and understand. But people that have walked that, that path, they get it. So I think I was very worried that, as my world closed down, that I would lose some of that support. So we got told we're not allowed, we can only meet people outside, or we can't meet, those support networks that I'd maybe formed whilst I'd been off to help me through the, to where I'd got to at that stage. I was really worried that I was going to become very isolated, whilst trying to juggle the children at home. I thought, it's on me. I'm feeling the effects of this. The chemotherapy is a rough ride at times. And I'm going to be at home with my 2 children that are going to look to mum to kind of provide that support and stability that they need, because their world is, I'd got used to being at home, but they certainly were used to being at school. And, they're not used to being at home the whole time and the homeschool setup. So I had to sort of try and put my mum hat on and think, right, well, how am I going to manage this? My energy, my, the effects of my treatment, but really my children, because I've always really focused on my kids. so it was my kid, they got me through, but they also, a lot of the time, they were the thing that kind of kept me going. But it was a lot to contemplate. So in that early March side, when I thought, oh crikes, it's going to be on me really to keep this all together at this time.
So did you end up shielding, Kat?
I did, yes, I did. Yeah, I ended up shielding for the full first lockdown, and I'm technically shielding at the moment due to ongoing treatment. It's my last treatment of Herceptin and Pagita, which is an antibody therapy which goes alongside the type of breast cancer that I had, and it's my last one on Saturday. So that's something it's been a long process, but I've got that's my final drug infusion treatment. So because of that, that's one of the things, I couldn't return to work whilst I was receiving this treatment. So that's quite a significant milestone, which is coming up in my week.
Yeah. So talk to me a bit about shielding with the kids and trying to do homeschooling, because back to that thing that we were talking about there, it's just having no place to hide, isn't it? On a bad day, a bad treatment day, just a bad psychological day, when you just want to stay in your jammies and maybe just curl up, you can't do that, can you?
No, you can't. You can't. I think that's where maybe some of those conversations with the children I'd had earlier, which were quite good, that the fact that we didn't go into too much depth about my diagnosis and what was going on, but they certainly were aware, and they knew that mummy was receiving treatment for cancer. So they knew that mummy might be a little bit tired some days, but crikey, you don't have anywhere to hide when they're at home. I live in a 3-bed house, and you know, they're sort of wanting that attention and they're wanting that time. And you do, I think cancer is one of those things where you can very much have good days and bad days, depending on whereabouts in the journey you are. And the fatigue, the tiredness that comes with it is something that I've never experienced before. And the emotional impact, the roller coaster that you go on, and you do just have some days where you just think your head, you get inside your own head and you're thinking about it quite a lot, about the future, and you look at your children and think, you know, it's not always easy to face that. I mean, there's been times where you feel teary. There's been times where but I've used to find that with them, having them at home, I didn't have I don't want to say luxury, but that time to deal with my own emotions and my own journey, to process what I was going through, because I had them, you know, I had to put their needs first. So many a day I would maybe kind of hold it in. I'd have like a knot in my stomach. I'd be wanting to feel something, but I would sort of plow on. I'd be like, right, no, let's keep the routine. Let's, you know, let's get their breakfast. Let's try and do some homeschooling. You know, I put for us, what worked was I put a little timetable up on, so they could see that, you know, we would do some homeschooling, we'd have some lunch, and that gave me a little bit of focus. Okay, if I can just get to the next stage of my day, then, you know, I'm a step closer to bedtime. And then sometimes after bedtime, I would just, you know, sit down on the sofa, and then the tears would come. It would be the relief of going, I've got through another day. And, you know, that was tough. You know, just tough getting through a day when you've got to sort of, you know, spin the plates and juggle the balls, without that energy to necessarily do that.
I absolutely get that, and we'll talk more with Amanda about this in a few minutes, because the thing is, you know, that emotion is absolutely natural and right, and it needs to come out. And this is part of why it's so important to talk about what we're talking about today, because what coronavirus and children and lockdown has done is put a cork in the bottle for people who are going through the cancer journey at home, and the natural emotions that should be spilling out, and we're all there to help and support with it. They can't. You're trying to hold it together for your kids.
I mean, there is days where it did spill out, and I think that's okay too. I had to take the approach that, you know what, if the emotion did occasionally spill out, that was okay too. You know, you can't protect the children and your life from it. It's very much become integral. It's part of my life now. And there were days where, you know, the tears maybe would come. They wouldn't. I would have a bit of a cry in my bedroom and then go back down, you know, sort of dab my face, splash a bit of cold water, go back downstairs and go, you know, mummy's a bit hot, mummy's fine. Or some days I just say, do you know what, mummy's a bit sad today. Mummy's just feeling not very well today. Why don't we just put a movie on and have a cuddle? And that was one of my ways. We'd, you know, it could come out of nowhere. I think that was the other thing that I was finding. I could get up in the morning and I could think, right, okay, today's going to be a good day. And then by lunchtime, that dynamic could have changed for whatever reason. I could have seen something. I could have just felt a little bit different, or I could have just responded. I didn't quite have the resilience that I once had to deal with the treadmill or the constant keeping everything going. And, you know, a little situation would happen and it would cause more emotion than maybe I was used to.
How much did coronavirus play into that? So, you know, that mood thing that you're talking about there, obviously it's affected by your treatment and the therapies that you're going through, but with stuff on the news as well, I mean, some of those really hard-hitting, especially as a medical professional, seeing in wards, seeing the COVID rates going up, seeing the death statistics, all this in your head as well. Was that playing into the emotions that you were dealing with?
Oh, absolutely, because you're feeling isolated, and I'm thinking, crikey, if I get coronavirus in those early stages, what treatment? I'm a cancer patient. What treatment would I be offered if all the wards are full? You know, your head is sort of, you start thinking, well, you know, I'm not going to be at the front of the queue of receiving treatment, rightly or wrongly. Whether that was right or wrong, I don't know. But this is the type of thing that was, you know, that you go. So I had to try and protect myself. when my husband was still here, we were living separate lives in the house because he was a key worker and was working out in the coronavirus. I was scared to be anywhere, we were scared to be anywhere near each other in case he'd brought it into the house. So he had his Daddy had his own upstairs bathroom and bedroom, which I didn't go in. I had one downstairs, and we lived very, because it just put that barrier between us. The children even didn't engage, because we were so worried that if I caught it at that stage in my treatment, that we didn't know what effect that might have. So things like, I wasn't going to the supermarket, it was online shopping, it was, changing to how we were living at home. And that was all brought about by coronavirus. COVID, I was scared to see, to my family, my friends were suddenly on Zoom, it was Zoom calls rather than seeing them, which is it's just not the same. So coronavirus was, having cancer is hard. Having cancer in the middle of a pandemic and homeschooling children just felt like it took it to another level.
Let's dig into homeschooling. You brought it up, so let's talk about it. How's it been going?
Well, homeschooling is, I can imagine with a 5-year-old who's a whirlwind and a 7-year-old, they're very much at the point where they need full support. They can't sort of just go, here's your work, go off and read it and off you go. So they need that sort of one-on-one to access it. I think the first time round, the summer, it was, we had the patio doors open. There was lots of outside schooling that went on. PE was on the trampoline floor. And I think the first time round, the school wasn't maybe quite as prepared, and I wasn't as aware of, how to use the systems, the schooling systems that were being sent to us. It was all a little bit more chaotic. This second homeschool lockdown has been a lot more structured, and I felt like I've had to be teacher a lot more. But I think I've got a bit more up to speed this time, because I think I knew what to expect. But yeah, there's some days where you give it your best, but I'm not a teacher. I'm a nurse. I'm not a teacher. And hats off to any teachers out there, because it's a tough gig.
I think we all have a lot more respect, if we didn't before, for what they do right now.
Absolutely,
for sure. So, big day on Saturday. How are you going to celebrate it?
And again, coronavirus is, is taking, I suppose, the celebration. I'm taking some treats into the nursing staff that have looked after me on my chemotherapy ward, because they've been amazing. And actually, at times, they've been the people that I have been able to talk to, because they've been those faces that I have been allowed to see. They've been the consistency. I haven't had my work colleagues, my friends aren't from that world. So actually, I've become very close with some of the staff of the St. James's chemotherapy ward. So it's going to be it's going to be strangely a little bit bittersweet, because I won't be going, I won't be seeing those people anymore, and I've made some really close bonds and friendships with them. But obviously, I'm very pleased to be getting to this stage. I don't think I'm going to say that I'm at the end of my journey. I don't think when you have cancer that you ever get to an end point. I've reached the end of this stage, which is, the most active treatment stage. So I think a glass of Prosecco will be had when I come home. And I think I might treat myself to a takeaway. Right. It's going to be a party in June. I turn 40 in June, so I've got a date circled in the. I think there's going to be a post-lockdown turning 40 end of treatment party that I think needs to happen. That
is good timing. You've timed that perfectly, haven't you? There was a great story up here. I don't know if you saw it in Scotland last weekend. There was a nurse I think she's in St John's Hospital in Livingston, saying that she's lost 1.5 stone in weight in the last year because of no sweets being allowed on the wards. And no sharing of sweets. So all of a sudden, everybody's losing weight in the NHS, but the rest of us are putting it on behalf of you. Kat, stay there. Questions for Kat, they're coming in, so keep them coming. Anything that you've heard from the conversation that Kat and I have been having so far, any experiences that chime with what you've been going through, any observations you've got about Kat's journey so far and what you've learned from what she said, and any questions you want to put directly to her. We'll do some of those a little bit later on. I've taken way too much time, but it's so nice to speak to you. So let's bring in Amanda just now. Amanda Proctor, Centre Head at Maggie's in Leeds. Amanda, hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me.
It's great to see you. How much harder, we've heard from Kat's point of view as somebody going through the journey, as someone who's there to support people on that journey, how much harder has the past year been for you, Amanda?
It's been so much harder, and everything that Kat has described resonates with what other people have been telling us too. You know, the homeschooling, the pressures of work, or the uncertainty of work with cancer as an added pressure. Those are the themes that we're hearing right now, and all those strategies that you would usually use to help manage some of those situations, seeing family, help from friends, just haven't been there. We've not been able to do that. So it's been you know, much more difficult for people going through cancer treatments and having to shield and thinking about relationships and children. So much more difficult.
But at the time we needed the technology, boy, it has come along, hasn't it? I mean, I'm looking at a screen that's got Kat on it. It's got you, it's got lovely Samantha and Jackie from Maggie's in Edinburgh who put this together. Today we've got our audience with us as well. We're all joined together in this wonderful virtual world. How much have you relied on that in the past year?
Oh, without a doubt, we knew as soon as we went into that unknown territory of what a lockdown meant, you know, would we be able to open the centre? Would we be able to see people? So we quickly had to move into a different way of supporting people. And what we didn't want to do was leave people abandoned and not have that support in some shape or form. So we very, very quickly moved into a telephone support, virtual support, and you know, our IT, you know, we've got a very small IT team here at Maggie's, and they, you know, they really stepped up to the mark and really helped us out and got things set up for us. So we were working from home for a little while, but then we got back in the centre as soon as we possibly could, and then we've started to shape our services into a blended mixture of virtual, telephone and face-to-face to try and meet the needs of everybody that we're supporting and what feels right for them, whether they're shielding or whether they're caring for somebody that's shielding, or whether you know, whether they're self-isolating before treatment. So we're trying to flex our services to meet the needs of those people that we are supporting.
And in terms of the atmosphere at Maggie's, because everybody always talks about that, Amanda. I remember years ago somebody told me they thought it was like casual caring. You know, it feels informal, but it's there for absolutely everything that you need. Have you managed to maintain that through these different ways of doing it?
Yeah, I think we have. I think we've had to tweak things a little bit. So we had only just really opened our doors. We opened in the November as we hit the pandemic in March. So we just started to build our community. We just started to see the life in the centre. So people coming in, making those really special connections with other people that are going through something very similar. So we knew that those connections wouldn't happen as well online. But now we're back in the centre. We are seeing those connections in a very different way. So we are saying to people, just come in, we're here. Just come in, we're here with you. But we've had to put a few things in place like track and trace, washing our hands much more regularly, socially distancing, the wearing of face coverings. But we are having feedback that people do feel safe, that they do feel comfortable to come into the centre, albeit in a slightly different way to what we would usually do. You know, the kettle is always on, but we're making drinks for everybody at the moment. So we're just tweaking things a little bit, but hopefully that warm, friendly feel and that informality is still there.
And the conversations that you're having with people, how have they changed over the last year, Amanda, especially around the pressures that we've been talking about with Kat of being all locked down with cancer, with children? What are the sort of things that you're picking up from people?
Yeah, and I think it's definitely been those added pressures around, as Kat described, you know, that kind of, you want to pick your moments when you have those conversations with your children. You want to carefully think about how you're going to have those conversations. And actually, when you're at home all the time, those conversations might happen when you least expect them to. And as Kat, you know, she described sometimes that just happens, and that's okay. We're not always going to get it right as parents. I'm a parent myself, and we don't always get it right. And actually acknowledging that to children is a really good role model for them, that in life we're not always going to get it right, and by, you know, showing them some of the emotions that we are going through helps them to show their emotions too. You know, the other things that people have found quite helpful is, as Kat described, trying to maintain some sort of routine, but giving yourself that permission if it doesn't work out today. If it doesn't work out today, we'll try again tomorrow. What can we just let slip for now? You know, Kat talked about a little bit of extra screen time at the moment, won't do any harm. You know, that's okay. You know, homeschooling is usually a choice that you make as a family. It's not usually thrust upon you. And when you're having cancer treatment and you're going through, you wouldn't usually choose to do homeschooling when you're going through all that. So all these decisions and control has been taken away. So the control that people talk about that they've lost through cancer is even more apparent now through going through all the difficulties of being at home and feeling quite isolated.
Kat gave us a masterclass in talking to children about cancer. What are the conversations that you have? If someone comes to you, Amanda, and says, look, I've got 2 young kids, 5 and 7. I need to sit down and have this conversation with them. What support have you got available, and what have you found down the years works well?
What we find works really well is to support parents to have those conversations. We know that talking to a stranger would be really difficult for a child. So often parents come into the centre thinking that the right thing would be for us to talk to their children. And actually, it would be about helping the parent or their close relatives to have those conversations. And about, as we've described, you're not always going to get it perfect, but being honest, being open. And as Kat talked about, you know your children better than any of us. You know, their age appropriateness, and when they're very little, talking about just drip feeding little bits of information, little bit at a time when you feel ready to do that. Thinking about looking at their behaviours. They may have lots of behaviour changes, and having some insight into that. There might be regression, there might be sleep pattern problems, there might be behaviour changes, because if they find it difficult to articulate how they're feeling in words, they may show that in their behaviours. So having a kind of understanding that things might be very different for the children, that school might feel more difficult. As Kat has described, keep the school informed of what's happening, keep the teachers informed, because there will be another support mechanism for you when you're going through this and talking to your children. Being honest, as Kat described, being very honest, but in an age appropriate way. And talking through things at their level, at their pace, and when they are ready to ask the questions.
Amanda, I'm thinking of one example with a friend of mine and her teenage son when she got ill, who was more than anything angry. And I'm sure you come across that as well. And that's why it's such a great idea, as you say, to talk to the school about issues that may come up around this. What's going on with that anger?
Obviously, teenagers can feel all kinds of emotions anyway, but when their parent is going through a diagnosis, there can be lots of things around. You know, we had an argument last week and I feel really guilty about it, and I'm showing that through anger. For some children, they sometimes think it's their fault. I've caused all this stress, so it's my fault that the cancer has happened. So reassuring, being there, listening, as Kat described, an extra hug, an extra cuddle. Sometimes teenagers need that too. And also trying to link in with other people that are going through something similar. So as Kat described that she found using a book quite helpful to speak to her younger children, there are resources that we can think about for teenagers coming together and meeting other people in a similar situation, so they don't feel quite as isolated with it. And again, keeping who's important to them involved as well. It might be their friends that they're talking to, it might be their teacher, but it's probably more likely to be their friends, and giving them that permission that it's okay to talk to their friends about it.
How much detail do you suggest that people go into with it? You know, when you've got someone like Kat who really understands the medical background to this and what's going on with her body and the treatments and stuff, it's maybe easier to talk about that stuff than, you know, someone like me who's a lay person, not involved with medicine and doesn't have the terminology or perhaps the medical understanding of it. How much do you suggest with families, with children in particular, that you go into the detail of it?
I think we would always advise to use the word cancer. but being very careful, as Kat described, her children hadn't had experience of that kind of negative connotations that come with cancer. So if you've had a family member with cancer who's died, your conversation might be slightly different to what cancer means, that, you know, not everybody dies of cancer, people can get better. But we know that some people will not get better, and it's how you describe that to your children as well, and how you prepare them for what might be happening in the future. And it might be preparation for death, it might be preparation for getting better, but that information, kind of a little bit at a time, taking it really steady at their pace. But we would usually advise being quite honest. So every time you have a bit more new information, kind of finding that time to sit down with the children and talk it through with them as well. And to use very clear language, because we know that sometimes if you say poorly, or if you say a lump, or if you say, that could be, well, my friend was poorly at school, have they got cancer? So it's kind of, children are quite black and white with the language that they use. Sometimes if we're not clear with the language, they can fill in the gaps themselves, and their imagination can be much worse than the reality.
You know, what's another big difficulty with all of that is the online resource of Google and NetDoctor and Symptom Checker and all these kind of things as well. What advice would you give around that and talking to children? Because that's what a lot of children, I'm guessing, will do, and we can check in with Kat about that maybe in a second once you've told me. But you know, I can imagine my kids would be Googling it, and they'd be checking for themselves if what I'm telling them is straight, if there's more to it, prognosis, all this kind of thing. Would you encourage that, but send them in the right direction?
Yeah.
Maggie's?
Yeah, so we've got an online resource with lots of information, and there's lots of other credible cancer information sites that we would signpost to. And that's the other kind of difficulty. If you're not honest with your children and you don't have those conversations, they'll fill the gaps with looking online at things that could say lots of lots of things that are not true, that are very scary. So if you have those conversations and back it up with some information that's credible online, they're not going to look at, they may look at that things that are very scary if you've not had those conversations.
This is quite a challenging time, Amanda, as we emerge from this, and lots of positive messages from the government about light at the end of the tunnel and an phased end to lockdown. But for people who've been shielding, people like Kat, who are still coming through treatment, it's a nervous time as well, emerging and being in spaces that are busier and having more people around, and that sense of kind of dropping our guard towards all of this. Are you tuned into that? Are you aware that for people that might be quite a tricky few months ahead? Absolutely, and that's why we will take our approach to support quite cautiously, and we'll make sure that the centre feels safe for people to be here. And the groups that we usually run, we'd encourage lots of people to come along to those groups, but actually we know we're going to have to take that very, very slowly. And what we've said, and lots of Maggies will do the same, is that we will keep a platform for virtual support as well, and telephone support, so that people have a choice. So as they start to build up their confidence, they can come into the centre. But if you're feeling quite anxious, you might want to have that telephone support for a little bit longer. You might want to have that virtual support for a little bit longer, and balance up feeling a bit more confident and comfortable. It might be even Maggie's is the first place that you come to when you're not shielding, and we're seeing that through people's treatment, that we're very privileged that we're seeing people who are at home, they come to their hospital appointment, and the only other place that they've been is with us. So they felt safe to do that. So we have an absolute responsibility to keep that safe place and keep that safe for everybody that trusts us when they come into the centre. We're very lucky in Leeds that we've got a big open space with lots of ventilation, lots of room to be able to socially distance, or to kind of keep that safe space if you want it in the future. And what we're thinking about is responding to the needs that people are telling us now. So the next workshop that we're running in March is around managing uncertainty, and I'm sure that some of those conversations will be around not just cancer, but the world that we're living in right now, and how we emerge from that, and how we feel confident to do that. when you take the face masks off, when you start to, yeah, it's a really interesting subject. But let's check back in. I think we've had a really interesting conversation, Amanda, but Kat was looking very comfy on that bed. So let's just check back in. No, she's still awake. She's not fallen asleep. That's a good thing. Just picking up on that point that Amanda and I were talking about there about kids and Google and search engines. Were you aware that they were maybe too young? I can't remember when it was mine were 5 and 7. Are they still checking stuff like that?
5 and 7 are probably they're just a little bit on the young side. So I'm quite pleased that they didn't have to I wasn't too worried about them accessing those resources, which might give them the misinformation. I could control the information that they had, but I certainly accessed the resources, looking for things, ways to speak to the children in age appropriate ways. So I used sort of the search engines. I used, the Maggie Centre, things that I got signposted towards to look at the right things to be saying to them. But yeah, I didn't quite have the teenage problem of them accessing it without me.
That's a whole other world. That's another discussion.
That's one we're just tiptoeing in. I've just been asked for TikTok by my 7-year-old. Apparently they've all got TikTok. I'm like,
Crikey. Tell them they can only get it for Christmas. That's usually what I did with anything like that. We've got questions for you, so you keep them coming. Just using the live event Q&A function, and any observations that you've got as well. This one is from Valerie, and she's asking, Kat, how will you feel about the place work will have in your family life after months of being at home? Great news about this Saturday coming up for you. That then starts to open up a conversation about thinking about return to work. We know the kids are going back to school. How will you feel about the kids going back to school and you eventually going back to work?
It's a massive change in dynamic in my world. I mean, before cancer, I was busy working mum of 2, and I had a very much a career. My job was, I was progressive at the time when my cancer was diagnosed, and it's still a big important factor in my future. So I do feel that I'm on a bit of a threshold of about to step back out into something which looks a little bit more like a normal life, but it's quite a, when I think you've been pared down for so long, it's going to be take a lot of adjusting to. So there's a little bit of trepidation, there's a little bit of nervousness, but I am looking forward to hopefully making that step and getting to that stage where I can just feel a bit more normal, just as reality. But I'm sure there'll be lots of people maybe in a similar who have been on furlough, whatever, who are feeling that as well. As the kids.
Interesting thing, actually, yeah, because as you're going back looking for normality at the same time, probably as lots of other people will as well.
Yeah, it's funny the way it's actually coincided. That yes, I'll be going back at a time, maybe just my journey will sort of open up as hopefully if lockdown lifts, it'll come together around the same time. I've got a little bit of guilt that I've not, as an intensive care nurse, obviously intensive care has been very much at the forefront of a lot of the news reviews. My job would have kept me very, very much involved in what's been going on with coronavirus, and I've not been able to support that. And my colleagues, I'm in touch with a lot of my colleagues, and they say obviously what a difficult time they've had, and I've had to deal with not being involved with that. So I'm hoping that I can go and give a little bit back to the NHS, as to, it's supported me so fantastically well over this last year to 18 months, that I'm hoping just to be able to go back and do a little bit to support it. But it's going to take a while of getting my hands back in and adjusting to. But my bosses have been very supportive, so I'm grateful for that. And we had a conversation recently about making a bit of a phased return plan, so that's in the pipeline. That's
great to hear. Amanda, question for you here. I'm generalising a bit here, but men are useless. I'm pausing for effect here at talking about things like this. Have you noticed any drop off in the way men have been using Maggie's during this time and communicating in this way? Has it made it, do you think, any harder for men to come forward?
We have seen some of that, but we're quite surprised actually by it. What tends to happen is that and again, this is a generalisation from me now too. What tends to happen is that men come into the centre, and because we've got that informality, they can just come in for a cup of tea or just to use the space, just to have a breather. Anybody can do that. And I would say, on the whole, and this has been very generalised, that men tend to do that. So they will take a quiet space, they might read a book, they might do some work. So I guess what we're trying to do is adapt our support a little bit, and that's fine, because people might want to get to know us before they have a conversation with us, and that's okay. And that's what we tend to find more with men, that they want to get to know us a little bit more, and they might come in for a specific reason, like benefits advice, or I've come to get some information for my partner or my wife or my children, you know, grown-up children, and then we open up the conversation about, but how are you? And sometimes that's enough, but sometimes we need to dig a little bit deeper. But on the whole, we do find that men will have a conversation with us. I think what we found more difficult is men coming together to talk to each other. And that's something that we're looking at, working with the hospital team, with the prostate cancer team, and how we bring those men together when we can, and think about some workshops around men that are having hormone treatment for prostate cancer.
Yeah, because there have been these initiatives like the Men's Shed movement that has been successful in getting men to open up, but it's finding the right vehicle for it, isn't it? Nicola, hi Nicola, she's saying, I agree with everything Kat said this afternoon. It's not just a physical fight, the mental and emotional side is horrific. No one tells you about relationship struggles too, and with kids in the middle of a pandemic, it's horrible. Painting a smile on each day is hard when you're struggling and trying to process what you've just been through. Maggie's is a safe haven. It helped me so much through the journey. It's still ongoing. We don't give ourselves enough credit for what we do each day at a time. Thanks for that. Keep your comments coming, just using the Q&A function, or any questions that you've got as well. Amanda, do you think there'll be a lasting psychological impact on people, on how coronavirus has affected their treatment? How it's, you know, if it's maybe slowed things down, or they've seen it perhaps getting in the way of their treatment. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think we will see that, and we're already starting to see, you know, that there's a campaign at the moment looking at, if you've got symptoms of cancer, come forward, because we know that's been really difficult. People were scared of attending appointments right at the beginning of a pandemic because they were scared, and those symptoms have developed into a much later presentation of cancer. And I'm sure, you know, that there's lots of statistics and data analysing all that, and that's what we're predicting. And we're starting to see a little bit of that in the centre. And I think what we've found quite poignant at the moment is around much more complex grief, because people haven't been able to be with their loved ones at the time of death, and some of the trauma that comes along with that. And we've been working, we have lots of staff support with our psychologist, and we've been talking about, actually, this is trauma that people have gone through, and almost like a post-traumatic stress type trauma that we're probably going to see as a result of everything that people have been through.
Kat, someone's asking here, what are you looking forward to most about when this is over? This can be homeschooling, this can be cancer treatment, this can be coronavirus. You choose how you want to answer it.
I think I'm looking forward to being able to live past a day to day. I think when you get cancer, you know, I think I've sort of touched on that your world kind of gets very pared down. You know, I've focused very much on, you know, putting little routines in just to get from one day to the next to try and get to the end of this journey. So I think being able, and somebody would say to me, what are you doing next week? I don't, you know, and my answer to that is often, I don't know, because depends on how I feel. It'll depend on, you know, I just can't pre-plan. I haven't been able to sort of think, you know, I had obviously my initial treatment, and then it went into needing sort of further operations and things, and that, so every time I thought I was getting somewhere, I'd get sort of pulled back and there'd be something else to face. So trying to plan has been something I haven't done now for 18 months, which I think in my previous life I would have been a bit of a planner. I would have liked to have, you know, I'd had things up on the calendar to say, you know, things to look forward to, and I've scaled right back. So I think coming out of the pandemic, you know, as COVID opens up, as the kids, you know, just getting that little bit of normality, and it seems something that I think maybe I took for granted, but just being able to say, you know, yes, I will do that in 2 weeks' time. That's okay, you know, that's going to be great for me. That's what I'm really looking forward to, just being able to kind of go, or to book a holiday. I think we're all ready for that. But yeah, just to be able to say that no, there's nothing in not having to think, oh, have I got treatment? Is this going to get in the way of what I want to do? So yeah, a bit of planning.
Come to Scotland for your holidays. It's not very sunny, but we're lovely up here. Nice people, nice scenery.
Love to. West Coast. I want to get up that West Coast. Looks beautiful.
Yeah. Amanda, what about you? What are you looking forward to most in terms of what Maggie's does when this is all over?
I'm looking forward to hearing noise in the centre. I'm looking forward to, you know, every Maggie's has the kitchen table where people come together and make they're really informal connections. They just happen naturally. So I can't wait until people can just come in, make themselves a cup of tea, sit at the kitchen table and make those connections with people just really informally, really naturally, and not have to worry about a face mask or social distancing or any of those other problems, that we can just sit and have those conversations together.
That'll be a happy day, won't it, for all of us? Listen, we're almost out of time here. Thank you to Maggie's for making this really important conversation possible here today, and also, of course, the People's Postcode Lottery for their partnership and their associated support, which is so important. Thanks to Kat for, this isn't easy. I mean, you know, you're going through enough in life at the moment without asking you to take part in a Microsoft Teams call with lots of people and talk about all this. But I think you've helped others this afternoon, and you certainly helped me understand more about your journey here. And I'm so happy that Saturday is coming for you. I'll be thinking, I tell you what, I'm going to make a big sacrifice. I wasn't going to be drinking in March, but I'm going to open a bottle of something and raise a glass to you on Saturday night as you're having your Prosecco. Kat, stay well. Really nice to speak to you. And Amanda, thank you for all the amazing work that you do. And we'll all look forward to that day when things do get back to normal at Maggie's and elsewhere. If you want more information on any of the things we've talked about here this afternoon, just go to the brilliant website, maggies.org/coronavirus. There's lots of information there, or all over the website. Thank you very much indeed for watching this afternoon and for your time, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Bye-bye.